to keep an eye out on social media and otherwise about these vigils. It's a way to support people who have loved ones that maybe are not having funerals or are not necessarily recognized in that way. I think we've had dozens of people just since the last report who have passed away, and we just want to make sure we recognize them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Morin, for doing that. I'd also like to acknowledge the passing of our former Premier, John Horgan. And our thoughts and prayers go out to his family, and also acknowledge the passing of Senator Murray Sinclair since our last council meeting. And again, an amazing person in Canada. And I'd like to recommend for those of you who'd like to honor Murray Sinclair to take some time and look at the 94 calls to action. Thank you, Councillor. And his tireless work for reconciliation and decolonization. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Garbutt.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So we have adoption of the minutes.
You probably don't have that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. My apologies. We have a late agenda item. We have received a letter from the Indigenous Women's Sharing Society requesting the city waive the facility fees for a memorial service for Elder Doris Weisland, who is also a freedom holder of the city. This is an important member of our community who's been active at all levels and has been honored for her commitment both to Indigenous components of the Valley as well as the Eurocentric settler community, largely involved in many, many activities, both in celebrations as well as our educational system. And we have a recommendation for council.
Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll move that council amend the agenda to add the letter from the Indigenous Women's Sharing Society under Section 7, External Reports and Correspondence, as item 7.2 to the agenda.
It's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, and motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have a second introduction of item. Staff respectfully request council's consideration to schedule a council meeting on December 18th due to the anticipated length of presentations and discussions on two complex and related agenda items: the Complete Communities Project and the Development Cost Charge Review Project. The agenda will also include bylaws for final adoption. The public hearing previously scheduled for December 18th is no longer required. We have a recommendation for council's consideration.
All right. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, and motion carries. Thanks, Mr. Garbutt, for that, and for council for adding those items. And now we'll move into adoption of minutes. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, we will receive those unanimously by council, and we will move on to Parks and Recreation Advisory minutes. And are there any errors or omissions or questions on those? Seeing none, all those in favor, and that passes. Moving on to 4.1, we have the RCMP quarterly report. If somebody like to move receipt. And
Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the Mayor to Council, we have an invited presentation from Instructor Scott Mercer on the second quarterly report from 2024.
Thanks very much. And your microphone's on, so you may just need to adjust it a little bit off to the side.
Well, thank you, Council, for allowing me to present here today on my second quarter report. I'm now, I think, 4 or 5 months in the chair at the detachment, and I'm enjoying every day. Every day brings a new fire, sometimes 7 to put out, but I'm happy to be here. and I'm happy to present my second quarter report. But first, I would like to mention a few items of interest for council here. Staff Sergeant Corey Kilborn, who was in the acting role prior to me coming to the detachment, has recently been promoted to Inspector of Investigational Services for Kelowna. So he will be actually leaving us at the beginning of December. It's a loss for us, but a gain for them. Corey did an amazing job in my absence, and he's a person that I rely on every day for sound advice. So it's a loss for this community. A couple of items of interest for us is that we're going to be doing a speed awareness campaign next week on November 22nd. We're going to try and hit some of our more problematic areas throughout the Comox Valley area, as well as in the city of Courtenay. This is going to be an education piece for drivers in the area. You'll probably see myself and municipal traffic out in this and on some of these roadways in which we're going to be advising them of their speed, and then have an opportunity to have conversations with them roadside to advise them what the consequences of speeding offenses are and how it affects their driving record. In addition to this, we're looking to do a candy cane check stop within the month of December. This will be more of a promotional opportunity for some of our community-based groups, such as Citizens on Patrol, Crime Stoppers, and Victim Services. We will be pulling vehicles over, but in a friendly manner, to have an opportunity to talk about some of the distracted driving issues that we have within the community, as well as the need to have sober drivers during the holiday season, and then introduce our community partners as an opportunity to increase participation in their community groups and generate awareness for them. We're hoping to do that in the city of Courtenay, as well as the surrounding communities, and we'll try and advise you of the dates and times that we're going to be doing that throughout the month of December, as well as we're going to be doing planned check stops throughout the month as well, which will be visible police presence in our communities, again, to advise of the consequences of drinking and driving during the holiday season. Also on December 6th, I believe, the Wounded Warriors are doing a charity hockey game to raise awareness and funds for their cause in relation to frontline members, military personnel, as well as police officers that suffer from post-traumatic stress disorders. This was a popular event last year. We're doing it again this year, and it's open up to the public. You can purchase tickets through the detachment as well as through the CanX. And if people want an opportunity to see police officers get beat up by the junior A hockey team, it's a good event. Without any questions, I'll proceed into the second quarter report. So I had an opportunity to forward it off to you, but I'll just kind of hit the grace points here. We saw a slight decrease in our calls for service from last year's second quarter. The most common call for service was check well-being, which was followed by theft of property, suspicious circumstances, and mischief to property. The most common call locations were predictably in the denser areas of the city of Courtenay, so Cliff Avenue, Ryan Road, and the Crown Isle Shopping Plaza. We did see a notable increase, 571%, so from 7 files to 47 files that were particular to family services group homes. We had some challenging issues with some residents that were in there in terms of they're on notable release conditions, and they were also the subject of missing persons complaints. So while it is a large number and alarming, but we are taking notice of it and trying to find mitigating factors to prevent the need for police to be involved in situations at these group homes. The downtown area, the most common calls for service were unwanted persons, assist, fire, and ambulance, assault, and theft. Violent crime saw a 2% decrease from last year's second quarter reporting. The most common was assault. We did see a notable increase from 10 to 20 reported files that were sexual in nature, so sexual offenses. I can report that these were not related or serial or predatory in nature, but singular reports that were made to us and that they're investigated. We saw an increase as well as in extortion. We're starting in some of the weekly dispatches that I've been giving to the communities, and that I've been noting that there is a popular extortion scheme in which persons are approaching people either online or through any sort of social app and engaging in conversations. They're portraying to be a person of their age. Or in wanting to seek a romantic relationship. They lure the person into providing a photo of them, and then they use that photo against them by threatening to release it publicly to extort for money. A lot of these are international based. They're not locally based in terms of the perpetrators that are committing these offenses. So we're trying to connect with our support units within our division to see if we can try and mitigate some of these extortion schemes from coming into the Comox Valley. Our best means of trying to combat this at this point is to shed light on it and provide education pieces around it. So we're going to be exploring those options through our schools, which are notable targets, as well as our elderly community as well, which seem to be high value targets for these schemes. We did see an increase in child pornography in terms of distribution and possession. I've reported again through our communication to council that we are seeing an increase in these reports that are coming to the Comox Valley area. These are reports that are shared to us through our ICE units, as well as our other child exploitation organizations. Again, some of these offenders that are being reported to are in the Comox Valley area. Our major crimes unit is considered a subject matter expert, unfortunately, in this field right now for the amount that we're inundated with. But we believe these are righteous investigations, that these need to be investigated fully, and we put all of our resources to ensure that we're protecting the safety of children. The locations for violent crime again occurred in our dense areas, so we found mostly circulated around the downtown and Ryan Road area. For property crime, we saw a 3% increase from last year's second quarter reporting. The most common that we found was mischief to property, followed by shoplifting, theft of motor vehicle, possession of stolen property, and arson. Arson, we saw an increase in 400%, a little misleading in the figure. It went from 1 to 5, which caused that huge increase in percentage. None of these pertain to the same location, that they're individualized, so it wasn't a serial actor that was doing these offenses. With respect to controlled drugs and substances offenses, we saw an increase in drug possession calls for service, as well as a decrease in drug trafficking. With respect to drug possession, I believe I touched this last quarter reporting, in that when we saw a reversal in the decriminalization, the calls for service have increased for people's general awareness of reporting these activities. This percentage increase and this number increase does not translate into charges that are being laid. These are just calls in which we're responding to. The line that I have been telling my members is that there is a social and humanitarian aspect to this that we need to respect, and we will respond with enforcement when necessary. But our focus is completely on the trafficking and the providing of these drugs, not the actual possession for persons that are affected by addiction issues. With respect to traffic offenses, we saw a decrease all around in terms of the amount of files that were being reported to us. Currently, we are operating at 50% for our municipal traffic unit due to an unforeseen medical issue with one of our officers, but we're exploring options to do enhanced traffic shifts to ensure that traffic safety measures are met within this community, because it's been identified as a priority for this year. I'm happy to take any questions from this council regarding my reporting or any other policing issues.
Excellent. Thanks so much. And really do appreciate you letting us know about the various things that are going on in support of the RCMP, like the Wounded Warriors event. And yeah, send our best wishes to Inspector Kilbourne. Do we get to call him Inspector now, or is it once he moves?
He has to move and actually take residence before he gets that title.
Yeah,
I found that out the hard way.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Thanks so much for that. I'll pass it over to Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. And thanks, Inspector Mercer. I don't put a ton of stock in increases and decreases in crime stats because from my own experience in the field, I know that you know, one or two individuals who if they leave the community, the crime rate goes down, and if they're here, it goes up. So but having said that, there was a significant decrease in your calls for service from 2020 to 2021. That year, 2021, that went up by some significant amount, and then it went back down again. And I'm just wondering if there's anything that you might attribute that to that would be helpful for us to know.
I don't have anything that I can actually report on today, but I'll certainly take it back. I mean, there's a bit of a learning curve to understand the history of various police issues within this community. So I find that if there's an influx of new persons that come to a community, if there's a population increase, that tends to generally affect calls for service. But I'd have to take a closer look to try and understand. And we do have the benefit of an analyst that's embedded within our detachment. So I lean heavily on her as far as going through the files and kind of giving me an idea as far as what sort of trends and patterns we faced during those timelines, but I'd be happy to report that back to you.
Sure. The other thing I wanted to ask, we had an inquiry from a resident who normally comes to council meetings but isn't here tonight. One of the things he wondered about was whether the plans to eventually move the Connect Center downtown and develop the social housing and permanent purpose-built shelter in the Braidwood area is something that the RCMP would have concerns about in terms of calls for service and changes of that as a focal point. I don't know if that's something that your staff pay close attention to. It hasn't actually happened yet, so perhaps it's not on your radar.
Well, I mean, as far as the shelter coming into the plot of land right beside us, I mean, we have been tried to make ourselves available on the ground floor for many of, whether it's BC Housing, being participatory in the conversations that I've had with them. Our focus and our only focus has always been public safety, whether it's, you know, within the city of Courtenay or within the surrounding areas. So I don't look at any particular structure as being problematic. I view it as an opportunity to try and work together to address any sort of issues that may be coming down the line. It's hard to predict what impact the shelter will have specifically within the Braidwood area or next to the detachment. I'm not terribly concerned about any security issues ourselves or if our calls for service will generally go up in that particular area. But I'm confident that whoever is going to be running the facility will be running it well. They'll work with us to try and mitigate any sort of issues there are in terms of public safety or any security issues whatsoever. But something that we'll keep an eye on. But I have nothing really to report substantive that would legitimize any sort of concerns that I have that it's going to be problematic to us, other than we'll have to wait and see.
Sure. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian and Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Inspector Mercer. You were talking about the concentration of calls in the Ryan Road area and the Cliff area, and I guess that's probably not uncommon that where you get greater population density and people, you're going to get a higher number of calls. And just for people who are watching, I assume that, well, I think I know that a higher number of calls means a greater allocation of resources to that area. And for that reason, I've often heard it said that it's really important for people to report things, even if they think it won't necessarily get resolved by a police officer, but just to make sure that there's an awareness of patterns of activity. I'm just curious if you wanted to just sort of validate that theory that where there are greater numbers of calls, there are greater resources placed, and if you see that as being useful for people to be making reports, even if it's perhaps too late for the police to take permanent action.
There are certainly some challenges in terms of why people report or they don't report issues. It may be past negative experiences that they may have had with the police, with having to wait on our dispatch line to provide answers to questions that they've provided before, you know, if they have called before. I know historically, especially working in Indigenous communities, the idea of being held online for 5 to 10 minutes when they're trying to report something that is important to them, that took a lot of courage for them to come forward on it. It is disheartening, and it's always a challenge that presents us from a detachment perspective. I would always encourage people to utilize the ability to call us, to use some common sense and judgment as far as how they notify us, whether they use the dispatch, like the dispatch line, the general dispatch line, or the need to call 911. I will never discourage anyone from how they call the police, but I just ask that education piece for them to be aware that there is a difference between calling for the police eventually and calling for the police now. Now, with respect to the Ryan Road area, I will add on to that a lot of these calls for service generate specifically around the Superstore area, that shopping complex. There's commercial business there, there's foot traffic, there's vehicle traffic. There's a tendency for things to happen, whether they be theft or just simple fender benders, right? So but yeah, if people are apprehensive about reporting, then there's an onus on me as the detachment commander to also dispel any sort of myths and concerns that people have by providing an educational piece. Maybe that provides me an opportunity to consult with the local media to create that awareness as far as how to utilize this effectively.
All right, thanks for that. Thanks, Councillor Cole Hamilton and Councillor Moore.
Great, thank you, Mayor. I have a few questions, but I'll just start with a couple and other lights might go on. Yeah, I always find the reports interesting, and I really appreciate all the attention and how these reports have gotten better and better. And so I appreciate the detail. So I note that the two areas, the group home and the personal residence, generated 67 calls. So those calls would be included in the total, I'm assuming. So if those whatever is happening in those homes or those residents and homes in terms of the issues that need to be resolved there, if those were resolved, then actually we would have shown a fairly good decrease in incidents, it sounds like. Is that fair to say?
I would like to see, yes, that by the next quarter, we should see a decrease. And that our responsibility as managers is to ensure that the police resources are being effectively used. So if we're responding to a particular residence or a particular group home of any kind, and exponentially in the manner that it's being reported here, then we need to look at mitigating strategies to try and reduce that police footprint that's there, whether it's to look at different means of not necessarily an enforcement measure, but other means to incorporate community supports to address these issues so that we're not utilizing the police in something that may not be even a policing problem.
Right. And of course, we're awaiting our PACT program to come on, and hopefully in the next few months, we'll see maybe not as many calls for you folks to have to go out to if something can be remedied through the support of the peer assisted care teams. So I guess my second question is around the wellness checks in particular, and even unwanted person, those particular calls. I mean, check well-being was down 10% and unwanted person was down 3%. But I guess sometimes I think there's some confusion because we have calls for service and they may go up or down and might even spike a bit. But my understanding is that those are not all crime. They're not all criminal in nature. You're being called out.
Yeah.
But they are folks having mental health crisis or someone loitering around a business or residence that's unwanted, but not necessarily stealing or causing harm to anyone. So I'm just wondering if there's anything, I don't know if there's a way to break it down in terms of what's actually criminal in nature and what is actually impacting public safety.
Sure.
Because these are not all, we see these reports, but they're not all public safety issues per se. These are calls for your attention.
I would agree with that assessment in the sense that it's ambiguous in terms of what these numbers represent, and that there can always be some clarity depending upon what this council is seeking. As Councillor Hillman had said stats can represent a variety of things depending upon the voice that's using it, right? So with the power of having an analyst in our detachment, I may be able to explore that to see, from a criminal perspective or a criminal offense side, how many of these calls for service are specifically from a public safety perspective. That I would also just caution on the fact that, maybe not a fact, but an opinion of mine, that not necessarily just because it doesn't fit or categorize within a criminal offense does not necessarily mean that it doesn't meet an element of public safety that we would get involved. But I do agree that when it comes to check well-being or assist ambulance and fire, or say and to a lesser offense related maybe activities such as an unwanted person, that there's a humanitarian element to this that doesn't necessarily require solely a police officer there, especially when we're dealing with mental health. And I've had some productive conversations with Jeff Garbett and to talk about other strategies that we might be able to look in the future and employing that can incorporate a mental health aspect with a police officer in some capacity. We've seen those initiatives successful in other environments that I would like to explore here, but that would be a conversation that I would have with council at a later time, because I think there's an opportunity and an avenue for us to pursue that. That would reduce some of these calls for service, because I would say that check well-being, while they may show that we're down, we spend an exorbitant amount of time responding to these types of calls. So there may be a proactive measure that we might be able to do to reduce that number in the future by doing early intervention.
Yeah, and I suppose you'd have to follow up sometimes with getting someone to the hospital and things like that, which all takes time. So yeah, I appreciate that. I'm hopeful that once we get some of these other support services in place, that maybe it will alleviate some of the workload in that area. And what I find most concerning is obviously those things like the sexual assaults and what was the other one that went way up? Extortion, that those are things that we definitely want to have some attention to. So thank you.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Councillor Morin. We've had a pretty good conversation here, so thanks, councillors, for that. And Inspector Mercer, appreciate not just coming and presenting today, but the work you've been doing throughout the community. I've seen you just about at every meeting I've been at, so just want to acknowledge that I think that's a really good thing to be doing. So really appreciate that. And so we have a motion to receive, I believe, and that's on the, it's not on the floor yet. Sure. All right, all those in favor? Motion carries. Excellent. Thanks very much. All right, and we got a delegation by Ada Sotavilla and the Adventure Force to School. So maybe I'll get a motion to receive.
That's it here. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Oops. Here.
Yeah, put the microphone. However works
Thank you,
best for you.
everybody, for this opportunity. It's we've been starting this conversation for about a year, and I'm very happy to be here today. With me here is my friend and coworker Ricky. She was the one initiating this petition, this request. She's not working with us anymore, but she's here today, so I appreciate your support. So I'm the manager of Adventure for the School in Courtenay. We are located on Mansfield Drive, next to the air park. Sure that all of you are familiar with this area. It's a beautiful spot. We have a park next to us, and we noticed that we need to bring out some issues that we have when we go outside at the park. It's because our building is surrounded by parking lots, and on all the way to the park, there is the road, and also there is no crosswalk right close to us. The nearest crosswalk is next to Whistle Stop. which is far down the road. There is a speed limit sign, 30 kilometers in the area, but we also notice that sometimes it's not respected. So it's something that also brings us our concerns. I have some pictures of the area and our kids going. Yeah, and this is our program. I just wanted to share with you what we do. We like the kids to enjoy the environments, and even that we are structure based, we spend at least an hour and a half all day outside. And the place that we're going mostly of the times is the air park, because it's just very close to us. It's a great area. You can see on the left, people, that our building, we are located on the very left. And this is a picture of the kids coming back from the park. So to access to the park, we have two different ways. This is through next to the window, the building, as you can see. And the other one is to cross. And I don't have a picture, sorry. I think I have it, but it's.
And that's the Rotary Sky Park there.
Yes, exactly. It's not here. In front of our building, there is another parking lot, and it's a crosswalk in there, but there is a blind spot right on our door. So it's kind of a curve. So if we cross by there, it's very dangerous because we don't see all the cars that are coming from our right. So we tend to go walking along the building, and then if you see on the right picture, there are like a row of houses. So we walk that way until we get to the park. And this is where we mainly close. This is the safest place that we find. It's next to the 30 kilometers per hour sign. There is visibility. We can see the cars. We stop the kids. We look. We check. As you can see, all the kids are wearing vests. So it's also like a safety tool for us. But yeah, like you can see that it's kind of like finicky to walk along the houses and not having a crosswalk. We go there every day. These are our kids playing there. Yeah, it's a very busy area too. Like there are bicycles. When we cross the road, there is also the bike and the walk sidewalk, right?
Mhm.
So there are two things that we need to face before we go to the park. So the crosswalk here would be ideal. The sidewalk, it's something that additional would be like adding more safety to make sense, right? To guide the kids, to mark the road, to help the cars to see us better, to have more understanding of the environment, and then also like to cross to the park. There is a bike lane, so just to add another crosswalk there would be amazing. And yes, for safety matters, that's what we write it down, that the benefits of this would be that provides a safe area for also for the residents and the pedestrians. In our building, there is a pet store, and also there is they walk the dogs and they also cross like us, like just without a crosswalk, just like right in the middle of the road. So it would be beneficial for all the residents there and the businesses. Yeah, it's a very busy area. It connects a lot of families and elders, and I think that would be something to consider for not only for our centers, but I think that would be very good for the city and to promote also the space and people to go to the park. Our traffic's concern, these are the traffic's concern that we see, that there are crowded roads, parking, there are 2 parking lots that we are facing, and then there are more cars also that are coming in these areas. More people are coming in this town, so we can see like there is an increase of traffic. And also like what I mentioned in the beginning, the speed limits and all this, it's something that we have in mind and we observe. And also that the blind spots that we find on the roads. Yeah, and if we had clear signs And I think that the area would be more safe for the kids and for everybody. It's just also another thing that I wanted to mention is that we don't take the other road where there is a crosswalk in front of us. There is a porta potty, and that porta potty sometimes we have a lot of garbage. The door is open, smells bad. It's not good for the kids to see that, and we think that walking along the houses is a cleaner area. And yeah, it just we've been operating for almost 3 years, and this is what the best route for us. We think that that's the best route for us to go with the kids. But for sure, I think that if we bring this up to you and you have like some other vision, another vision to see like better ways to do it, like some experts to come and look at it, that would be fantastic to help us out. See, these are the porta potty that I was talking about. Cars everywhere that park, sometimes like, kids, even like we are on and the cars might not see them, and it's just a little bit finicky. And we also created a petition for the parents and for the community. It's online. There is a QR code, so all the neighborhood knows about that we are asking for it. We are very active for it. Families are excited, and yeah, they don't know that I'm here today, but they know about this petition, and I can't wait to send a newsletter. And they are they support us a lot, and also like, it's very important for us. And this is we have an Instagram account. If you guys want to follow us, please look at us and see more what we do. And we hope to hear from you soon. Thank you so much for listening. Do you have any questions?
I'm sure there'll be some questions for sure. I'll maybe make a couple of comments.
For sure.
I know that area quite well and was able to be part of the Rotary Club that built the Sky Park.
Okay.
So I know it fairly intimately, and I've done a lot of work in that area and have taken my kids there quite a lot, but in a car parking. One of the things I would say, though, when you're talking about the overflowing garbage or issues with the porta potty, is that you can actually contact the city.
We do.
And yeah,
We do.
perfect.
We
Okay.
do. They know me
Okay.
a lot.
Okay. Good. All right. Great to hear that. I see that
Yes.
we do have a light blinking here, so I'm going to pass it over to Councilor Gillian.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks very much for your presentation. I used to work along the street from you long before you were there. In fact, that was before I was on city council, and Mansfield Drive did not in fact have a line down the middle of the road. And I wrote a letter to the city before I had any idea that I might be sitting here today asking for a line down the road. But sidewalks was also an issue because, for example, there's the Ministry of Children and Family Development, which has a lot of clients coming there from vulnerable circumstances. And on days like yesterday, walking on the edge of a road with no sidewalk and not a lot of protection from vehicles is a challenge.
Thank you.
So I have a lot of sympathy for what you're advocating for here. I did actually go by the area yesterday because I couldn't remember the porta potty. Is that actually our porta potty? It is. All right. They seem to keep moving it. It was in a different
Been there for a
location.
while.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so I recall when I inquired years back about further development of that area, it was expressed to me that we don't do these major developments where we put sidewalks into areas that don't have them because they're pretty expensive until we maybe have a redevelopment going on and somebody puts in a new building and we can get them to pay some of the costs. But I think we may be able to ask our staff if there's some other thing that we can do as an interim measure to create some additional safety for your children. It seems that you've got a pretty going concern there, and we want to make sure that the children are as safe as possible. And You may have read that traffic safety has been a major concern of this council, particularly around schools and daycares. So I'm hopeful that we can come up with something that might be helpful for you. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We have 22 kids. It's a lot. And one thing that I didn't mention is we go to the parking with 2 groups, right? And also that's something that we came out with when we increased the spots last year. And we go first with a group of 8 kids and then the 14 remaining come after. And that helps to prevent a lot of like things that can happen, right? It's really good for us, for supervision also. But the issue is the same, right? Like with a small group, with a bigger group, we can do as much. Thank you.
Excellent. And maybe as a follow-up to Councillor Hilling's comment, I know that we do have sort of city plans in terms of crosswalks and sidewalks and improvements that we're doing. I don't know if staff would like to comment on it today, or maybe it might be something we can refer back to for a report. Mr. Garber.
Thank you, through the mayor. We don't deal with delegations on the night. Council's aware, we've brought forward a traffic calming policy. There's very clear method. If a neighborhood, in this case, it's a combination of commercial residential, was interested, there's information there and they can approach our staff. Now that we have direction from council, I would be, will say, be hesitant to make commitments there. There's significant redevelopment potential there, extremely costly improvements, and we have a local area plan identified for that area. So although the existing conditions may be hazardous, in the opinion of the delegation, we have not identified it as a high issue area at this point. And we do have processes that will unfold based on council's priorities.
Thanks for that. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Ms. Soldevilla. Yeah, well, I'm not going to repeat what our city manager just said, but we do consider these at a future meeting, and I can imagine it would be difficult to get that many little kids across the road and the worry of cars coming. So I understand where you're coming from, and I hope we can have a chat about this at a later meeting and see if there's something we can do, or if in fact it has to go through a bigger, longer process. But I wish you the best of luck with your business there and commend you for doing it. Thanks.
And I don't see any other questions or comments at this point, but yeah, just to reiterate, thank you very much for coming today. It was a very good presentation. So great to have the photos and get a sense of things. And I did notice in one of the photos that that center line was there. So Councillor Hilling obviously had some pullback then. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, and we'll move on to staff reports, and we've got 6.1.1 letter from residents from Lambert Drive response. Mr. Garber.
Thank you, through the mayor. I believe Ms. Wade's going to do an introduction to this item. Well, you've got your light on, so.
Thank you, City Manager, through the Mayor and Council. Yes, tonight we have our Manager of Community and Sustainability Planning, who will be providing you with a short overview of the report before you.
Thank you and good evening. The report in front of you provides staff's recommendation to amend existing no disturbance covenants following the request from residents along Lambert Drive to discharge such covenants. By way of background, a number of residents along Lambert Drive have an environmentally sensitive area within their backyards. That's tributary 9 of Piercy Creek. These areas are protected with covenants that were registered on title at time of subdivision of the properties many years ago. And then in 2021, the residents were subject to illegal tree cutting within the covenanted areas through the actions of others. Following the tree cutting, the covenanted areas were left with standing and fallen vegetation debris, and the residents more recently requested of council that the covenants limiting activities in these areas be discharged so that the debris may be removed. Upon review, staff's recommendation is that the covenants be amended and not discharged, as the covenants provide additional protection measures such as no building and requirement of a physical fence be maintained to protect the environmentally sensitive area. The specific recommended language is provided in the resolution and would allow for vegetation removal to occur only in circumstances that it is undertaken under the direction of a qualified professional for the purposes of public infrastructure maintenance, safety, or ecological restoration, and in accordance with any senior or city approvals, government approvals. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Great report. I'm happy to support it. Just a question of clarification, probably for our finance team. In the third, that statement, the costs associated to the Land Title Survey Authority fees from the gaming fund. Do we have an estimate on what the total fees will be?
Ms. Wade.
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor Jericho, yes, they're approximately $88 per title. Yeah.
All right, thanks for that. Councillor Frisch. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. So generally in support of what's being suggested here, but I'm just curious, this is where property owners, as a result of an adjacent landowner, had all sorts of debris left essentially in their backyards. Am I correct in that?
Through to Councillor Hillian, that is correct.
Right, and did it ever occur to us when we find these characters who illegally cut down the trees that maybe they should clean up the mess that they made?
Ms.
Thanks.
O'Connell.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian, for the question. As council is aware, the two companies that were found to be guilty of violating the city's tree protection and management bylaw were issued significant fines and did pay those fines as per the requirement or pleading guilty to that. As far as compelling the two organizations to undertake private work on private property, we don't have the authority to do that. And essentially, the role of the city in the enforcement component was to stop and then deal with the enforcement of bylaw violations specifically. At that point, it then transitions to a private property owner dealing with a private third-party entity, which is outside of our jurisdiction. So the property owners do have options outside of local government that they could seek remedy from the two organizations that undertook the work.
Yeah, yes, that's what I understood, although that's obviously a much more costly proposition for an individual property owner than, no.
Thank you. In regard to, depending on the cost of the remediation, there's options around small claims court or other like potential suits where they could join together. The city does have full documentation, which I had shared with every affected property that clearly showed that the two parties had pled guilty, as well as all of the photos that would be required in order to provide as much information as the city possibly could to decrease any barriers to them pursuing further action.
All right, so that was essentially my concern, that we were removing the legal impediments from these folks cleaning up their properties, but perhaps they were being left with an undue financial burden as a result of something that they had nothing to do with. So it sounds like there's some recourse there, and I guess it's going to depend on individual circumstances whether people can manage that or not. Thank you.
And Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Mayor. Well, my question was basically the same. It seems unfair that those folks that violated the rules left all their mess there. I guess I understand it's on private property and we can't enforce that, but is there anything within the bylaw language that could help mitigate something like that in future, even though it is on private property, like something that I guess references the harm to the residents, and I don't know.
Mr. Garbutt's going to make a comment.
Yeah, I just want to stress that this is a matter between private properties. As much as we may or may not have some compassion there, these are instruments that are registered on private property. They're aware of that. The
Right.
other parties are aware of that. The municipality can't take action on behalf of other properties against other
Right.
private entities, and it's an unfortunate situation, although the path forward, I think, is quite clear. I would acknowledge that there's costs related there. And with respect to what the city can or can't do, these are all matters that are disclosed when people purchase. And there's been, in the recent past, there's been changes to the real estate legislation to make sure that when people either acquire or sell, they have to disclose these things. So it's very apparent. There are lots of stories that people have in the past under the previous legislation where people weren't aware, but there's been significant changes there, and it is an unfortunate situation. But I can assure you that staff have been very helpful with this circumstance, and it is unfortunate, but we have roles that we can play and cannot play.
Right. Well, I do appreciate Ms. O'Connell's comment about the residents will have all the documentation that shows that these folks were in the wrong, and hopefully that will help them to recoup some costs. Thank you.
And just to speak to the question regarding other options, as far as other options go, typically bylaw enforcement will deal with between the city and one property owner. So in the case that the city wanted to compel restoration, the individual that would be the target of that restoration or remedial action order would still be the property owner. So it wouldn't be something that would solve this scenario where it's a third party that's done damage. So yes, there are mechanisms, but again, the responsibility rests with the property owner to manage the impact of the disturbance in the covenant area on their own property.
All right, thanks for that. And Councillor Fresh.
Any clarifications to the, are you willing to entertain a motion?
Yeah.
I wanted to thank staff for finding a solution to this, and hopefully it enables the property owners to move forward with some sort of remediation. I'm noticing that it might not be the ideal thing they were looking for, but so I apologize for that. In any case, I'd like to move the recommendation.
All right, it's been moved in second. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, and motion carries. Next, we have the development permit area amendments for small scale multi-unit housing, SHMU. I'll pass it over to Ms. Wade.
Through the mayor to council, as we had indicated when SHMU came forward, we would make some minor amendments to the development permit areas to accommodate those regulations. And I'm going to turn the rest of the report over to our manager of community and sustainability planning to address the rest of the report.
Thank you again. The report in front of you provides a recommended consultation plan that would inform amendments to existing form and character development permit area guidelines for infill development, such as the small scale multi-unit housing or SHMU. Amendments to this development permit area, or we call it DPA, form and character infill guidelines, are recommended in order to comply with Bill 44 Housing Statutes Amendment Act, which you will be familiar, the province adopted late last year in order to direct local governments to undertake more proactive planning and allow for greater housing choices and densities. A major outcome of this legislation is that urban lots must now allow a minimum of 4 dwelling units, and which the city has adopted through the creation of a specific zone for that. The city's existing DPA framework is not tailored, however, to the SHMU specifically, and in order to better reflect the housing proposals that are now zoned throughout the city, staff recommend amending the DPA 2 guidelines for infill development. A number of targeted changes are proposed in the report and include removing the requirement for a form and character DP for 2 units or fewer on a property, which is currently required. So we do require them for detached accessory dwelling units, duplexes, and single residential homes in heritage areas. And another targeted change would be tailoring guideline language to more compact housing forms to ensure still adequate privacy, screening, and attractive streetscapes, as well as looking for ways to reduce design requirements with spatial or particularly significant financial implications. Under the Local Government Act, development permit areas must be designated within an OCP, and any OCP amendments require that a local government provide 1 or more opportunities it considers appropriate for consultation. I will note as well that the DPA guidelines, the guidelines themselves that are used to evaluate development proposals are actually contained within the zoning bylaw, so the zoning bylaw will require an amendment. Attachment 1 includes a proposed consultation plan, which identifies the general public and development industry as key interest holders, as well as efforts to engage with neighboring jurisdictions and senior government authorities that may have input, as well as KFN, to understand if they would like to be more formally consulted and how they would like that. In broad strokes, consultation efforts would begin with preparing the Social Pinpoint online engagement page this year with FAQs, materials, and feedback opportunities, and then development industry and agency workshops would occur in January. I think there's a small correction on page 5 where we state this would occur by mid-December, but this would actually be in January. And then an in-person as well as virtual public open house presenting the proposals based on that input that would have been collected through those other means. And then just a reminder too that OCP amendments require public hearing, and that would be scheduled for an April, and this work will be running concurrent to the downtown local area plan process, which, as you know, also includes significant engagement. Happy to take any questions.
Excellent. Thanks for fixing the things that need to be fixed in when you kind of get this stuff going and really working with folks that are trying to move forward with the new bylaw. And Councillor Gilles.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Really nice to see this report come forward and excited to see this work move forward in the timeline that is established. It's a tight timeline to get all this done by the end of 2025. And I think that the timeline that's established does give us some wiggle room if we need to. So I just want to acknowledge that, because I think that, you know, if we're looking at May 2025, that buys us, if we need to, a few more months, which I appreciate. I guess 2 questions of clarification. One, for the Social Pinpoint page, is that the only mechanism for public feedback? I think in other engagement opportunities, we've allowed for members of the public to come to City Hall to provide written feedback. So just again, wanting to make sure there's an accessibility piece, and that's my first clarification question, I guess.
Yes, a question through to Councillor Jolicoeur. Absolutely. The Social Pinpoint is simply one of the sources where you can obtain the information on how you can provide feedback or ask questions to staff. So absolutely written, email, phone. We talk to people certainly on the phone, coming to front counter, and then any of those particular, you know, online channels like a survey or the meetings themselves. So all those would be available. We've also, you know, in the past provided posters at the local Lewis Center and things like that, just to remind too, just so that people have that visual cue and then more information available.
Awesome. You have one more clarification question. Number 7 in phase 1, the public open house. Really happy to see that as well. Just for clarification in your verbal staff report, that at that stage, the recommended options will be presented to the public for feedback rather than just an open session. Is that correct?
That is correct, that we would like to be able to present actual proposals so that people can have something to truly engage on, some actual detail. I mean, ultimately consultation, we'll listen to what the people are saying, but there will be actual drawings and proposals. We find that people often can engage with that material when it's more detailed in a more constructive way than when it's a kind of general questions.
Thank you.
Ms. Wade?
Through the mayor to Councillor Jericho, just to clarify, we are limited by some of the requirements within the province and the regulations on what we can do with these development permit areas. And so we do have to adhere to that. And so they will be formed within that knowledge and those constraints within the regulations. So probably not as robust as we've seen in the past, but the opportunity is there through using Social Pinpoint, which will actually outline the whole process. That is also used to get surveys and other ways. So taking away from some of the paper that we've used historically, but we will make sure that it's also accessible for people. So I just wanted to clarify a few of those things.
Thanks so much. I don't see any further questions or comments, and I'll pass it over to Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks, staff. I'll move the recommendation.
All right, it's been moved in second. No further questions or comments. I'll call the question. All those in favor? And motion carries. Next, we have the Duluth Trail Multi-Use Pathway Project updates. I'll pass it over to, Mr. Garvin.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council, Adam Pitcher, who's our manager in the capital projects area, is going to give an overview of this exciting project. Just want to note, this is an example of interjurisdictional working together to develop active transportation linkages. And it was a lot of conversation over the last few years and involved a lot of community engagement because this, as a result, I think, largely of feedback from the Green team in that corridor.
Thank you. Through the CAO to council, the briefing note we have prepared for you provides a bit of an update on the status of the project. Our project will connect Lake Trail Community School and Arden Elementary with a 2-meter wide gravel pathway that is set back from the road and is intended for all users. We'll also complete about 600 meters of road widening will be constructed in order to extend the existing painted bike lanes along Lake Trail from Arden Road to Webb Road. So our design is complete and the project is planned to be constructed in 2025 and with our tender being released soon. So we're here to take any questions and we do have Bain from McElhaney, who's our design engineer, help us answer any questions as well. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just 2 questions of clarification. One being in the staff report, it speaks to the amendment and the increase in cost as a result of the design along the church. I'm sorry, I can't find the name of the church, but the church on the road there. There's not an explanation of the mechanism of how we're actually going to be putting it on their property. Can we speak to what that would look like?
You're already on.
Yeah, we're currently discussing with the church on that matter. I think perhaps it's not best. So we have that discussion here. I think would be my recommendation.
Okay. Second, if that's okay.
I see no other lights.
As it relates to the work on the culverts, and I recognize we don't have Janine here, but the integrated rainwater management proposal and where that might fit into this asset, this road for the larger pipes. I'm thinking about the weather we've had in the last few days, and I don't have that plan memorized, but my understanding is that we are going to be looking towards infrastructure, increasing the size of those pipes when we do infrastructure upgrades. And so just wondering if that's going to be included in this project.
Yes, it is. We are making some upgrades to the storm system, and I'll let Bain handle those pieces.
Hey, yeah, so we we did a stormwater analysis and looked at the current sizes, and we were able to determine that most of the culverts are currently sized the correct size for the design storm. Some of them are slightly undersized, but we aren't impacting them in any significant way. So in the future, those culverts that are undersized may need to be upsized in a future project.
Okay, thanks very much. I don't think I see any further questions at this point, so I think moved in second. All right, and Mr. Garvin.
If I may, just before council perhaps votes on this item, given the partnership that we have, I don't know that we need specific direction, but I think making a presentation to the Electoral Area Services Committee or the board as appropriate might be illustrative of the work we're doing together on active transportation. There's another very prominent project in the Lazo area that involved Area B in the town of Comox, but Mr. Davidson isn't here, who leads that area. But I think it's good. It's a very good news story, and it is a very unusual situation in that the road is the city of Courtenay and the school and church and a few other properties are in the city, but the remainder, all the other properties at front on the road are actually in the electoral area. So I actually think it's quite an unusual situation, and there is a reason in history there, but it's a really good news story.
Thanks very much. And yeah, I mean, when you look at the city of Courtenay map, it does look a little awkward this one little line going out to Lake Trail Road. So glad we were able to get as far as we have. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to acknowledge for the staff who've made the effort to come here and present to us today that this is a really important project for those of us around this council table. It goes back to when we had a group of students from Arden School come and present it to us in the term before this one. And we're really hopeful that some of them may not have graduated by the time it's finally completed, but I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing and express the hope that it is completed on time and on budget, and that we can all be there to celebrate with the large community around Arden School that's been waiting for this for some time. So thanks very much for your good work on this.
And I might just, yeah, I think it was 2017, so they may have graduated. But they were keen student, the Arden ambassadors. I got to work with them on their presentation, and them and their principal were amazing and very focused. So it was great to work with them. Councillor Warren.
Great, thanks, Mayor. Well, I'll just throw in a bit of cheekiness because I would say that maybe we've been waiting 50 years or so for some upgrades, because that was my neighborhood. And I remember having to run up that hill very fast when there were no streetlights, pitch black, taking my life into my hands. And these are very welcome additions. I think even just the addition of some streetlights was great. And I would yell out to the Cougars as I'd run up that road and tell them to leave me alone. But anyway, in all seriousness, I'm really excited about this project, and it does generate a lot of conversation, even beyond the Arden School families that came throughout the community. So, and I think it's a good news story in terms of the partnership with the RD. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Moore. And I think it really illustrates, as the city expands and takes in these rural areas, they're not built to the same standard. And so I think we're doing a better job of articulating that as we're bringing things in to know what those costs are going to be. But certainly that was something not contemplated here as noted by no sidewalks on either side. So Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just one more comment and question, and I really appreciate the staff report because it was a report that had an increase to the budget, but with no budget amendment. And on page 4, staff articulate why that is. And I'm wondering if we have, I think this is the first time that we've seen this statement that there's been some significant interest earnings on the Growing Communities Fund. And I'm wondering if staff can speak to a rough estimate on what we've received through interest from that fund.
And if you don't have that number right this second.
Yeah, obviously more than 250,000 because that's the increase.
Mr. Garbutt.
Thank you, through the chair. So we're going to be doing workshops and information for council quite soon on the budgets. Notes are being taken on what the value of that looks like. And so we'll brief council on that, but I don't think we're in a position right at this point to do that today.
Excellent. All right, but we're looking good, so appreciate that. We do have a motion for receipt on the table, so I will accept that unanimously for council. But there was that request to potentially do a presentation. Would you require a motion for that, staff, Mr. Garbutt? Yeah. So, okay, that moved by Councillor Jolicoeur, seconded by Councillor Frisch. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And motion carries. All right. Next, we'll move into snow and ice control for 2024, 2025. And Mr. Garbutt.
Thank you. Really happy today to have Mr. Thompson here and our new manager in Park Services, Stuart Carmichael. This is a very interesting and important topic for the city, and we have a little innovation that has been done to assist in communications on this. So over to our staff leaders on this.
Thank you very much. Do we have a presentation we can cue? There we go. Through the CAO to the Mayor and Council, I'm Chris Thompson. I'm the Manager of Public Works Services, and I'll be providing an overview of the city's snow and ice control program with my colleague Stu Carmichael, Manager of Park Services, as we head into the winter season. The goal of snow and ice control is to maintain a safe transportation network, meet legislative requirements in addition to council's defined levels of service, and prevent the accumulation of snow and remove it quickly. As we've have provincially designated highways in the city, it's important to note that snow and ice control along these routes is managed by the Ministry of Transportation and their contractor. So you may have already seen snowplows driving around the city as the city is preparing its snow and ice fleet for operations. We're testing front plows, the sanders, and the rest of the equipment that make up the snow and ice fleet. That fleet consists of 14 pieces of heavy equipment. These are the truck plows, those dump plows you see, front end loaders, backhoes, and a grader. We've got 2 pieces of medium equipment. These are the 1-ton trucks with plows. 10 pieces of small equipment. These are used for sidewalks and walkway clearing. 8 salt and sand spreaders. Those go in the back of the dump trucks with the plows. And we've got 2 truck mounted brine units that apply product, which is a mix of salt and sand. And new for 2024 is a mini skid steer used for sidewalk clearing and bike lane clearing. And we're awaiting the delivery of another 1-ton plow unit. In addition, we've also just completed a week of one-on-one training where each of the operators in the Public Works Department received 6 hours of training on the safe and efficient use of our plowing equipment. Here's a very difficult to read chart that's available on our city website. It outlines this it outlines the city's snow clearing levels of service, which it tells when the city will apply product to prepare for snow and ice, as well as when and how plowing will occur. These are attainable levels of service that city operations can reliably complete. So for example, on priority 1 roads, which are arterial roads, major roads, transit routes, and streets with hills, we'll see product applied before snow accumulates if temperatures are forecasted to dip below 0 degrees without rain. Plowing on these roads will be based on road conditions, but typically begin when 2.5 centimeters of snow starts to accumulate. It takes 6 to 8 hours to plow through those arterial roads and another 6 to 8 hours to go through the major roads, transit routes, and steep hills. City also clears snow from sidewalks and high volume active transportation routes where mechanical snow clearing is possible. This includes arterial roads, the downtown core, park frontages, transit areas, sidewalks adjacent to municipal facilities, and prioritized paved walking trails. Products applied to these roads before snow accumulates if temperatures are forecasted to dip below 0 degrees and are plowed at 5 centimeters of accumulation if more than 10 centimeters of snow is forecasted. So I spoke to snow clearing on roads. The city clears snow from roads in an order of priority. Arterial roads and major collector roads are first, with emergency services, facilities, bus routes, and the downtown commercial core. Then we move on to minor collector roads, streets with steep hills and school zones. From there is local roads and then cul-de-sacs and lanes. Here's our road clearing map that our operators use. It's shown with a legend, and this map, along with the sidewalk snow clearing priorities, is available on the city's website at courtenay.ca/snow. So I'll hand off my presentation to my colleague, Mr. Carmichael. He'll speak to snow clearing on sidewalks.
Thanks, Mr. Thompson. Through Mayor to Council. The Parks Division is responsible for, move my slide ahead here. The Parks Division is responsible for clearing snow sidewalks along designated routes throughout the city. Priority 1 routes include arterial roads, the downtown core, municipal facilities, separated bike lanes, the Riverway Trail, and Lewis Park paved trails. Priority 2 routes include sidewalks and walkways in school zones, park frontages, and East Courtenay paved trails. Priority 3 routes expand sidewalk connectivity between priority 1s and 2s and include other park frontages. Map of these priorities is shown with a legend and is posted on the city's website along with the road clearing map. Next, we have our brand new snow and ice control video. This video was developed in-house and contains the information on both the role of the city and the role of residents and businesses during snow events. It will be posted on the city website and shared with the public by our communications team through our social media channels. So sit back and enjoy this short video.
We're ready for questions. That was it.
Excellent. All right. Well, I'll maybe ask the first one that gets asked every year because it's the number one question that I get asked and gets posted on Facebook. And that's people who move here from, say, Calgary or much more snowy places for much more of the year. The number one question they seem to ask is about snow gates, where it actually lifts up for driveways and stuff like that. And I know the answer, but maybe I'll get a more expert answer because I know most of council may have to answer this question as well.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. That is probably the most common question any community gets. Why do you windrow in my driveway? I think that's sort of the question. With respect to the snow gates or the grader gates, that type of instrument or tool, it just takes an extremely long amount of time to plow. It's inefficient. We have, the average route has about 2,000 driveways on it. If you can imagine trying to accommodate that as a driver with all the other stresses and trying to keep on time, that is an issue. Unfortunately, as a Canadian living in a city with plows, it's just one of those hardships that unfortunately is faced by folks with driveways, and we can all appreciate that.
Excellent. And I think the other big thing is that, our annual snowfall, we get sort of 2 to 5 snowfalls a year that might require snow removal. So again, the cost of the equipment, I think, was a big challenge as well.
Yeah, that's right, Mayor.
All right. Thanks for that. And I'll go to Councilor McCullum.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the presentation, and the new video I think was really great and to the point and very shareable when we have our snow events. So I think it's a good additional communication tool that we've been given. My question was just around process and priority. We went through a fairly robust process over the last couple of years in terms of our updating our policy and communications, and the chart that you provided on the PowerPoint presentation. So my question is just if there's been any changes to those maps or any of the priorities and kind of how we laid it out, or if it's basically the same process that we used for the previous snow year.
To my knowledge, Stu can maybe speak to sidewalks, but roads are exactly the same as last year. This is the same presentation and the same process that we'll be going through and as last year in terms of snow and ice control.
Yeah, I guess the one small addition would be the new multi-use paved trail Hunt Road to Back Road addition behind the 801 Ryan Road apartments.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I ride that on my bike on the way to work, so I look forward to seeing that cleared in the winter. But better yet, maybe we won't have any snow.
Well, we want it up at the mountain, so if all the snow goes up to the mountain, for sure. Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Thanks so much. Yeah, Mayor, thanks so much for this report. It's a really solid plan. And I had one question about the sidewalks, if it's possible to go back to the map with sidewalks on it. Just about so I guess what I was wondering about is the green line on Menzies and First. I'm not sure anyone actually walks down that very steep, very sharp hill. I think it's just, I'm surprised to see that as a prioritized area. And I might suggest that because I live near there and I see the way people move through the neighborhood, they tend to come in at Pidcock and go down 4th, which would then meet up with the yellow line on Woods. But I'm not sure I've actually ever seen anyone walk up or down that hill where Menzies goes down to First. So just wondering about the selection of that.
What? Okay,
What?
now we're having a
Oh,
debate.
I'm sorry. I'm talking about sidewalks though, right? Not cars.
The sidewalks. Yeah, I think it's an important connectivity down
Alright.
to Puntledge Park and Puntledge.
Okay.
I almost feel like I gotta use a gavel here today.
Okay. Well, I will accept that I've obviously not been monitoring that carefully enough. Perhaps because I live on Fourth, I've seen more people move along there, but anyway, interesting.
It
Thanks
is
very
a
much.
busy area, especially during the school months there. So yeah, we tried to connect Puntledge and Lake Trail School the best we could with those priorities.
Yeah, that piece along Woods is really important. Okay, all right, I'll leave it there then. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Cole Hamilton. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. And just as a point of personal privilege, I probably walk down that sidewalk on that hill 4 or 5 times a week and run into all sorts of other people in the neighborhood doing the same thing. Many of them with their dogs. Yeah, one of the other questions that often comes up is around transit stops and places where people take the bus and are waiting to get on the bus. And we've had that concern particularly from people with mobility challenges. And I'm just wondering, it doesn't feature in the video or the presentation, but what is our approach to areas where people need to congregate to take the bus, and whose responsibility is that, and how quickly do we do it?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think that's a joint effort between roads and parks. As the priority ones sort of move to priority 2s is where we sort of jump in with our tractors and try to clear out the major bus routes and bus stops along the ways. We often get public inquiries very quickly about those and react to them as best we can as well. But it is it kind of lies right in between that sort of priority 1 and priority 2 as we sort of start moving staff around to rethink where we're headed next.
Yeah, that's good to know. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. And Mr. Garvin.
Thank you through the mayor to council generally. I appreciate the question, Councillor Hillian. And we have a very active community. Many of the prairie expats have very high expectations as it relates to that. So these are level of service discussion, and we do our very best to meet those things. Some years we have an extreme number of snow weather events. Other years we don't. One of the benefits and costs of challenges with climate change. So we do our best to balance that, and that's why our team, our forward-facing service team at Operational Services does their best to communicate with people and get that information, but we do need to balance those expectations. However, my understanding in speaking with Director Shaw is that when we know that there's going to be extended weather periods, we'll do our very best to prioritize that. We made a commitment to active transportation in those routes, and so we have to do it on a case-by-case basis. I guess it was 2 or 3 Christmases ago when all of our staff were all worked through Christmas to get that there. So we do that extra effort, but it is really largely dependent on what the weather forecast is because of our available resources. And we really appreciate the public's patience with us on that. But I do know that operationally, based on those kind of forecast and expected temperature issues, because I happen to have had a neighbor that said, no, we don't need to worry about the sidewalks because they all melt. But that doesn't work when the weather is over an extended period of time. So I just wanted to acknowledge that we do a lot of that, and notwithstanding this plan that we have here, we sometimes do have to augment it or pivot where extended cold weather periods are there, because our climate can make things quite treacherous. So it's not always necessarily either a volume of snow either. It's really those combination of factors.
Thanks, Mr. Garvin. And I think, one of the things that I always get excited is when you see the sort of lines going down some of the roads. I live at the top of 6th Street East, which is somewhat steep, especially in icing conditions, and seeing that brine on there certainly gives me a measure of comfort, not just for myself, but, for my family and my kids that are driving now too. You had on the one slide that it had those times, and I think that's a great way to articulate it, because again, council members may receive calls, maybe it's just me, but people who are wondering when their road is going to get plowed, and that list is great. And when I've had people tell me that road hasn't been plowed, Mr. Shaw has been able to, while I was on the phone, actually say, hang on 1 second, and pull up the GPS plot and say, the plow went by on this day at this time, which is absolutely fantastic. And that leads into my last question, which I believe I ask every year as well. Some communities use these plows as a way for the community to get involved by naming them. Things like Taylor Drift or Darth Blader. So I'll just leave that out there again. I've heard that something like that might happen, but that means you don't have to respond, but I'll let you if you want to.
The only, that's a great community involvement idea. There's also a whole fleet of new garbage trucks, which might lend some puns as well. So we can take that into consideration.
Thanks so much. I did talk to the folks over there as well, especially because if people can watch them on the GPS on a map somewhere and actually see them moving around, then that gives that level of comfort and knowledge. And the data is there, like that telemetrics is there for people to be able to see just what they need to see. As a geek, I also understand that, things take time as well. So, yeah. With that though, that was just a briefing note, and all right, it's been moved in second, and we'll just receive that. Okay. Stop. All right. So we're just going to receive that unanimously from council, and we'll move on to the Strengthening Community Service Grant, their final report, and we'll pass it over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Joanne Bays is going to do an introduction on this report. And as she's approaching the podium, I wanted to acknowledge that this is also a significant regional joint initiative that the city, with council's direction, came forward to deliver. The Strengthening Communities Grant, as you'll hear, has been extremely impactful across the region. It was extremely well utilized. These funds from the province, you may recall, started during sort of the COVID era, and we're one of I actually don't even know how many communities got an extension for the Strengthening Communities Grant. Perhaps Ms. Bays might know, but I'm not sure. Over to Joanne.
Okay. Just gonna. Maybe somebody can do this.
Is it clicked?
Okay, I'm on. It's a pleasure. Thank you very much, Mayor and Council, for this opportunity to present the outcomes of a multi-year, multi-sectoral project to support the homeless people or people seeking shelter in our community. And, I actually feel quite privileged to be up here to present the outcome, be here at the end to tell you the good things that you've been able to do. And I want to start by acknowledging that we have in our audience some of the people who were here initially when this started. So Roger, and we've got Heather and Patty and Paul, and also Kate, who were here at the beginning, who put their heads together and put together this proposal. So the title of the presentation is Together Responding to Homelessness in the Comox Valley. And I actually looked at this homelessness count and used it to put together our response. And it's a Better Together project because it wouldn't have happened if we didn't all get together and contribute. So let me see if I can. I made it work a minute ago. Oh, there we go. It's kind of tricky. Why?
Yeah, I can. Plan B.
Right button helps. So in the beginning, so how did this come about? Way back in 2021, we had unprecedented levels of homelessness here. And if you look at the homelessness count at that time in 2023, we actually saw that homelessness had nearly doubled. We had 132 people who were experiencing homelessness in 2020, and by 2023, that was 272 people. So that was quite an increase. And back in 2021, we were seeing that in the wake of COVID. And so the federal and provincial response to this urgent need to look after people who don't have the very basic need for life, a place to sleep, put out a $100 million pocket of money, which was available across the nation, to help communities who were wanting to act on this. And it was called the Strengthening Community Services Program. And it had a specific aim, and that was to support unsheltered homeless populations and help address community impacts in the wake of COVID-19. So it was very specific in that, and it was a 1 year. Suppose we were able to apply for a 1 year chunk of funds. And there were specific outcomes as well. They were this: improve the health and safety of unsheltered homeless people living in public or private spaces. So these are the expectations by the funder. Reduce community concerns and about public health and safety in neighborhoods where unsheltered homeless populations were seeking shelter. And the third was increase the capacity of applicants to work with homeless, unsheltered people and Indigenous organizations as well. And so there was an applicant group that came together and said, well, let's try to access some of this money. And I know, Kate, you were there, and Roger, you were there. And then we also had her, and Heather, you were there as well. Okay, and put together a proposal, very intentional about their proposal, because while they understood we only have money that will help us for 1 year to address immediate needs like showers and food and the basic things we need for life, we need to set this up so it's going to have some sustainability. So they put together a proposal that actually included elements to help us get to that sustainability piece. They were all after a home for everyone, but we're not going to get that in a year. And they understood we had to move through stages of change, complex changes, in order to get to that. They were starting with the stage 1, which isn't about changing the systems. It's about helping people cope with the existing system. And then they understood we need to raise awareness. We need to raise understandings. We need to reduce stigma. We need to teach people cultural safety and humility to know the population that we're working with. So we need to raise that awareness and build bridges. And we need to get some data. So we got to make sure the data is something that we can build on to use to further our work after the money runs out. So very intentional in the proposal development stage. And so they put out as well, they wanted to give that money to agencies that were ready to run with it. Not, so they put out an EOI to see which agencies in the community would be ready to run with money if we were to get this money. And so they had it, they did this setup, this very important set. So I should also say we had city there and the CBRD, and they put the funds, the application in. And they're sitting here, so I hope I'm giving the story in the correct way. But they were successful in securing over $1 million, just over $1 million for their project. And these are the activities that the project was to support: a temporary emergency warming center, a temporary emergency-based overnight shelter, a daytime community access hub, peer-led outreach and cleanup services, community engagement and anti-stigma outreach activities, training and capacity building activities across municipalities and the community. And I just skipped one on purpose, and that was rural outreach on Denman and Hornby Islands, because it was a regional project, even though most of this is happening here in Courtenay. And so in 2022, the city began administering that project on behalf of the CRVD. So the outcomes, I love this. So I took this homelessness count and I created our own. This is Courtenay's response to homelessness. And I have some copies of this as well. It's a beautiful graph that really quickly highlights the what we were able to do in terms of those outcomes that the funder expected, and then the legacy things that we were able to get in there beyond what the funder expected. So this first wheel shows you that we had 252 people in 2023 experiencing homelessness, and of them, about 150, up to 150 accessed one of our services per day. So 100 to 150 people were actually accessing one of these services. And these are the numbers across the board. So when you look at the 158,623 interactions with staff to receive assistance, that's people who are coming into these services are getting referrals, they're getting medication, or they're getting referrals to doctors, they're getting referrals to the justice system, they're getting administrative support, and they're getting basic needs like food. 85,000, more than 85,000 meals were served. Showers, more than 4,200 showers. And this one here, 33 beds per night. That's all we have in all of these facilities to offer. 33 beds per night. It's 10, it went up to 33. And over the period of this project, 1,034 nights. This says, yeah, we had 30,469 occasions where someone was in a warm bed rather than sleeping out in the rough. That's what you're able to do with 33 beds every day, every year. And the other one that's pretty phenomenal is that we did respond to 817 responses to toxic drug poisoning. That's 817 lives that were saved. It could be the same person, but that's 817 times. So this project not only improved the health and safety of unsheltered homeless people, it saved lives. And not only did it save lives, it empowered lives. We heard from people who were working in these different places that of individuals who are actually able to take steps to better their circumstances. And in one incident, I heard about, somebody who was on the street, who had, who became sober. We got her into a transitional house. She became sober. She went to school. She graduated with top marks, and she's a social worker now. So this is beyond the expectations of our 3.5-year project. So that's pretty amazing. And there are other stories as well. If you look, the second objective under objective, increase capacity to work with homeless people, Indigenous organizations. So the city of Courtenay organized a series of training sessions, and we provided 48 training sessions, and we trained 910 individuals. And a lot of these were staff and government workers and community support workers, people who had face-to-face working with people who are experiencing homelessness. And we actually, I think Patty might have led some of the training sessions too, but how do you respond to trauma? How do you provide better care? How do we reduce stigma? How do we work with cultural humility and safety? So these are the kinds of things people walked away with. And they didn't just walk away with it and internalize it. They put it into their policy statements. These kinds of things went into organizational lenses when they were creating programs as well. So it went beyond the training. And, here at the city, we've actually used some of this language and lenses in our policy or with bylaw and their work with the homeless. Kate could probably speak a bit more to that. So we did the training. And the last thing was to reduce community concerns about public health and safety. And I have to say, this is probably the most challenging part of our work, given we only had funds to respond to the issues. We didn't have funds to build the houses. So with the focus on building relationships and reducing stigma, I think we did do some mitigation of these issues. But you have on the one hand, businesses who are expressing regularly that there's noise, there's debris, there's encampments. There are people who are, taking drugs in front of children. It's impacting my livelihood. It's impacting my business. There's real fear there with the businesses. And I understand that. So that's the one side. On the other side, you have the people who are looking for a place to sleep at night thinking about last night, but looking for a place to sleep, and they're advocates and they're saying, I don't have a bed. I don't have food. I don't have a shower. Okay, and they're talking about, I don't have a bathroom. I don't have storage. These are basic needs that they're talking about. And the other thing is, we hear directly from people who are living on the street. I feel invisible. I feel disconnected. I don't belong. Or I feel people are angry with me. I feel hostility. I just want to be a part of this community. So there's all of these tensions in there. And what can you do with your stretched to capacity staff and the small amount of money we had? I think we've made great inroads by funding things like Sunday stations, so we would have community gatherings and building relationships around food. We did create community action councils, so bringing people together to relate that way to one another. We have much more to do. And we also hired peers to work out on the street. And they would go out 3 times a day, picking up the debris, cleaning up the sidewalks, making relationships with the business people, making relationships with their own family out there, responding to toxic drugs. So we did make some inroads here, and I think that's what we need to build on. So the lasting legacy is we did save lives. We did empower people, and there's some beautiful quotes in the report from the peers who are working out on the streets. And importantly, we strengthened the web of connections in the community. We're pretty connected, but now we're really connected. And not just in Courtenay and around, but across the region and on the islands. And these webs of connections are helping us to move upstream. We're seeing peers as a part of it, working with us upstream to do the parallel systems, to build the tiny houses. They're interested in these things, and we're seeing policy, and we're seeing funds, and we're seeing the Braidwood project come out. So I think we have much to be proud of. And so I just want to thank you all once again. Questions?
All right, thanks so much, Joanne, for the report. It's much appreciated. I mean, it was certainly an interesting thing. There was a lot of stress and a lot of stuff just to get the money flowing, and really appreciate everybody's work originally to get that grant. It certainly was a massive team effort. And of course, as those funds came to an end, we were certainly advocating to the province to make sure that the shortfalls that we knew would happen would be covered somehow. And some have been and some haven't. And now we have a new government that we can continue to advocate for. So again, just really appreciate everybody's work on this file, especially if we look at what the weather's been like the last weeks or two. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Joanne, for the report. Thanks to the people here today for all your work. I know it's come at significant cost, the cost of seeing the misery that people are in and only being able to do so much, the cost of seeing people who haven't made it, but hopefully also the opportunity of seeing what a difference it has made in the lives of many. I want to acknowledge, Joanne, the comments that you made about the wider impact on the larger community. And I'm particularly referring to the paragraph under outcome number 2 on page 6 of the report, where it talks about concerns regarding safety and public health in downtown Courtenay, where the overnight shelter and daytime community access hub are located, have been a significant challenge. The community and nearby businesses and their concerns about the items that you mentioned. It's something that we've actually been criticized for not drawing enough attention to the impact on local businesses, particularly at our last council meeting when we renewed the lease on the Connect Center for another year. And I think it's really, really important to say that we recognize the inadequacy of the facilities and the services that we're providing, that all they're really doing is putting a Band-Aid on a situation that deserves and needs so much more attention. I think it's really important for us to communicate to the business community and to others in the community that if we had an alternate location for the Connect Center, we'd be there tomorrow. If we had an alternate location that would provide a better service, and that we're not going to close the Connect Center, because we know if we did, we'd be dealing with so much worse. So I want to applaud our staff and the agencies in the community who continue to work to find better solutions. And I want to make one suggestion, because the recommendation that I believe is before us tonight includes that that staff send your report to other local municipalities and principal partner agencies. And I think we should make an effort to include the Downtown Business Association in that regard, and the Chamber of Commerce, as well as our new MLA and the provincial agencies that have provided funding, because I think it's really important to share that there have actually been positive outcomes, while at the same time acknowledging that we need to do so much more. So thanks very much for your presentation tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. And I might just add, we also in the Comox Valley have an MLA who is still an MLA, Josie Osborne. And even though she's Cumberland, but she's part of the family in terms of the valley, so to speak. So add her. If we're going to put our new MLA, I'd add Josie as well.
Okay.
But yeah, I really appreciate those comments, Councillor Hillian, and Councillor Moore.
Great, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, thank you for the report. I think it was great to see the quotes in there of some of the qualitative information and the stories. I think there's probably actually hundreds more stories that could go in there. And I think, you know, while I respect Councillor Hillian's comment about putting the Band-Aid on, and it does feel that way, that it's we're only providing a Band-Aid. And obviously the people who are in business downtown, they see this every day. And for them, for many of the folks who are compassionate, they probably feel like, you know, they see the same person, and they don't necessarily see something getting better. But I think we do need to remember that there are so many individuals that have been impacted. And from doing this kind of work, I would just commend our service providers, that I think that there is more than a Band-Aid being provided. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to pick on your comment, Councillor Hillian, but I think that it's hard to measure change and to measure measure that, and to, you know, you don't have a little ticky box, or you can't give it a number. But these positive stories are out there. When I look at the number of people who had toxic drug responses, it was around 800, I believe. That's 800 lives that are not, you know, that are not in that earlier report I made tonight, that we've now lost, you know, over 200 people to the toxic drug crisis. These are people that, you know, would maybe they made a connection with someone, and maybe that was the impetus to make an appointment with the doctor or do whatever else. And unfortunately, all those stories are difficult to capture and to quantify. But and I know this is the final report, but I think it's important to acknowledge that just because we don't know what the outcome of every person that has been connected with, we don't know. But I would safely say that there are many, many positive outcomes that we don't necessarily see, because, you know, we see the folks who are struggling outside or whatever. So yeah, thanks everybody. And I appreciate that we do have some service providers here. And I just wanted to say thank you for their work, and also in appreciation to the business community and the larger community for for really, you know, being able to, excuse me, I know there's many businesses that have reached out to folks. We have a new business in town that provided some support recently. I know there are local businesses that contribute to Sunday Station food. So I want to show appreciation for the business community that also has stepped up. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Moran and Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the report. It was, I think seeing the numbers was really a welcome surprise to me to see specifically the number right in the middle, which was 158,623 interactions with staff to receive assistance. And as someone who's worked in this field, and I recognize some of my colleagues have as well, we know that every interaction is an interaction for someone to make a choice in their life or to receive support that they might not otherwise have received if those supports weren't there. And so although it's a number, I really think that it's an opportunity for us to acknowledge that without this funding and without the agencies who provided the services, that there likely would have been some significant increases in some of the social and health challenges that people experience. The other piece that I wanted to highlight, because we have received some correspondence on this, is as it relates to the almost 7,000 instances of direct support or referrals to medical or legal or housing services. That is something that I think that for those who aren't necessarily involved in the social sector, they have curiosities around, and systems are challenging at best for most people, let alone people who have co-concurrent challenges, whether it be around literacy or mental health or addiction or poverty or access to things like a computer or a cell phone or a safe place to fill out a form. And so I do want to just highlight that as well. And then the last piece, I think that's something that I've really celebrated. I know that when we think about our business community, council has been really clear in inviting people and attending some of the training to downtown business community, but also those who interact with the general public. And I really appreciate you highlighting in the report the strengthening of the web of connections, because I think that once people also experience an opportunity to learn and ask questions, that they then become part of that web. And that we're just actually building more resilience as a community and more capacity to address some of the social challenges that we're experiencing. And so again, just want to lift my hands up to all those involved and to the staff who are part of this initial funding and then the extension of the funding and the additional funding. And I think this is something we can be really proud of. And I'm also happy to see that there are some ongoing projects as a result of this. So thanks for the report.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just make one final comment. Next week is the Housing Central conference in Vancouver, which brings together folks from across the province who are working in this sector. And I'll definitely be I appreciate I'm going to be taking a couple of those forms for sure. And I was happy to hear that the point in time count is being organized for next year again with some possible dates to get that data a little bit more current. So hopefully we'll be able to push. I know there's going to be people from BC Housing there, but hopefully we'll also, although we don't kind of have a government, everyone's getting sworn in right now, but hopefully we'll see some MLAs there as well that we can poke and prod. So, Councillor.
Thanks for your indulgence, Mayor. I just want to repeat something that I alluded to a couple of weeks ago, and that's in regard to whether or not we can get some data about people who are actually moving off the street. One of the best responses that I saw throughout this past few years was when BC Housing had not yet made the commitment to keeping the Travelodge open. And it was before we knew about the lodge coming along. And we got a letter that I think the Transition Society probably organized from a group of physicians saying what a difference it had made to the people they served that they were actually housed in the Travelodge. And I think getting some of that information out to the community about the positive differences that people have made in their lives through access to medical care and other services by getting into shelter and housing That's the message that we need to get so that our community does not lose hope that we're simply maintaining people in the squalor that they see on a day-to-day basis. And so I would again just ask if we can find a way to get some of those stories and some of that data out to our larger community. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Hillian. And we have some recommendations. I don't think they've been moved yet. Oh, Councillor Warren.
I know we have a recommendation there. I'm wondering, because it hasn't been made yet, I don't know if we can add, I think it's important what Councillor Hillian said about distributing a larger distribution. So I would suggest to the Chamber of Commerce and maybe the DCBIA adding that. Just wondering if adding those to the distribution, if people are in favor of that. Also, I'll move that.
Through the mayor to Councillor Moran, I had heard DCBIA, Chamber of Commerce, MLAs, and any other parties, MPs. So we can provide.
Yeah, I think if we could add that to the recommendation, I think that would be great.
So that would be under the second motion. Thanks.
That's been seconded. And John, actually, there's a question of clarification that I had written down and forgot to ask, but my assumption, this is all public information, so it can be shared, but I don't know if it's expressed in any of the information that people are allowed to share it, so that they don't feel that this is information that they're receiving, not necessarily confidential, but they don't have the right to share it. So, because again, I think getting that the widest possible audience.
Should we include that in our letter to, that kind of?
I was thinking one, a line that just, I don't know.
A line on the website.
Motion, Mr. Garvey.
Thank you. Through the mayor, doesn't necessarily need to be part of motion. I just would say that this is the city's information presenting on behalf of the community. Just want to make sure that the interpretation or utilization of that information is, I'm not saying it's proprietary, but it'd be important that it's if the material is used, it's a representation of the data itself, not an interpretation of it. Just not a downplaying that. I think it's be wonderful because there's many important organizations have utilized it, but just that the information is reported as circulated. But we all collectively own this work. It was definitely a regional and service provider group effort. So just wanted to.
And I should add that it's the funder has the data and it goes to provincial and federal bodies as well as part of the contract.
So that's happening automatically.
They have it, whether they'll roll it into other data, but yeah.
All right. Thanks very much for that. Councillor Moore.
Yeah, just speaking to this, I know we have the delegation to the RD, and I don't want to create more work, but I think sometimes a delegation to a group can address some of those potentially those contextual issues that can come up, because we did recently have an election where candidates were taking, pieces of information without any context. I mean, this is what happens during an election, often taking pieces of information with no context and distributing when there's a whole, just like our previous RCMP report. These are stats and numbers, and they don't provide the in-depth analysis of that. So I don't know if that's worth talking about at all in terms of doing a delegation to the business community as well, so that staff could maybe answer some of those contextual questions. I'm just bringing it up because that is, those are some of the criticisms that we're getting in terms of the outcomes, and I think it would be helpful, but I mean, the motion is the way it is, but I'm just putting that out there. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Moore and Mr. Corbett.
Thank you. Thank you for that, so you kind of observation that the information is powerful and useful. We have a partnership with the Chamber who is helping us with business attraction retention service. They are having regular business updates about a variety of topics, and I would suggest this would probably be a good one. I want to make sure that we have good support in place to make sure that it is a discussion of the information that's in front of us as opposed to maybe some of the wider issues. But this is, I will say this is first class work, leading work, as is the work we're doing in our bylaw enforcement area, policies, et cetera. And so any opportunity for the city to talk about the benefits and implications for the community, we can certainly do. I know Ms. Saunders is aware of what's happening right now. She's doing some excellent work as well on rural recreation. So thank you for that. And we can action that.
Thanks so much. Yeah, and generally I meet with the BIA every month as well as the chamber, and this might be something, again, like I'm thinking about getting multiple copies of that for when I'm doing fireside chats with Rotary clubs and other organizations as well, because it's usually, again, one of the things that's asked about the most. So really appreciate the just really the way that it's articulated in a simple, easy to digest way. So really appreciate that. We do have a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded, I believe. So all those in favor? And motion carries. We'll move into external reports and correspondence. There's a letter from Miles Thompson, 2009 Lambert Drive, with a title restriction. Councillor Frisch.
I'd like to move the recommendation.
Okay, it's been seconded. Are there any questions or comments? I think this is basically a housekeeping thing. Did you want to just do a little quick, thanks, Ms. O'Connor.
Thanks very much, Council. So you may remember this property from previous years. It has since been subdivided. So the original intent of the housing agreement, as well as the penalties, were really to require the owner of the original property pre-subdivision to maintain the home as owner occupied. When the property was subdivided, the covenants go with both properties. So we have Miles, who's in the audience here, who is going to be building his dream home with his new wife. And really, the concerns that originally warranted the housing agreement on the original covenant, we do not apply or really was not intended to apply to a young couple who's building their dream home. So staff is definitely recommending that council provide authority to address those covenants to allow them to move forward with a very blissful life.
Excellent. Thanks for articulating that. Sometimes things on the paper are a bit tough, especially in the context of this is a very unique situation, to say the least. And so really happy to see this coming forward and hopefully help you get on your way. So with that, all those in favor? And motion carries. And we'll get into the letter from the Indigenous Women Insurance Society. Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. So as people know, this is an item that was added as a late item today. Doris Wiseline, who I had the privilege of working with for a number of years on the July 1st committee and in various other aspects of her life in the community, was an amazing person, somebody who really enriched the community in so many ways. And we're being asked to support the Indigenous Women Insuring Society by alleviating the facility fees for the Philberg for a memorial service for her on December 13th. And I think it's something that we would gladly do. I note that there's a recommended motion here that talks about waiving the fees. But just before moving it, I just wanted to clarify with staff whether or not we need to specify where the dollars come from to do this. Generally, when we've done this, we've covered it out of gaming or something like that. And I'm wondering if that needs to be in the wording of the motion.
Yes, please.
It's on the screen. It's, oh, well, there we go then. Well, I move that the facility fees for the it's not in my script here. I move that the facility fees for the December 13th, 2024 memorial service for Doris Wiseline be paid from the court council discretionary funds gaming budget.
All right, thanks, staff for updating the slide. Sorry, Councillor Hillian, there was a bunch of things thrown at me when I came in today, and I missed passing that along to you. Yeah, just really happy to see this come before us today. All those in favor? Motion carries, and we have a bylaw for adoption, Parks and Open Spaces. I mean, this is kind of the last thing, so I don't know. Okay. Like a comfort break? Okay. The temperature I'm getting is let's get it done, I think. Yeah. If that's all right. And right, with that, Councillor Frisch.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move adoption.
Okay. I'll open it up to any questions. Councillor Joker.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Generally supportive of adoption, but I think it's probably wise for us to mention that we did receive correspondence from Comox First Nation. It's not attached to the public agenda. You have to kind of search for it on the website for those of you watching at home. It was received past the agenda being finalized, but I did want to just acknowledge the letter received and for Chief and Council for spending time to think about their response to that. And in particular, I wanted to highlight section 1 in their recommendations speaks to a consultative process enshrining a mechanism for KFN to be included in meaningful consultation on issues related to municipal government. And it was something that we heard from other proponents who spoke to this matter at previous meetings, whether through a written format or through delegation. And I'm hoping to hear from staff around how they see enshrining a consultation mechanism in other aspects of our work. I'm not entirely sure if it's something that would fit well within a very specific bylaw related to parks and open spaces, but I think it's something that we've talked about as a council. And so I'm wanting to hear from staff their perspectives around a mechanism for engagement with our rights holder in Comox First Nation.
Mr. Garber.
If this is actually the question at hand, if we're talking about an engagement right now, or we're talking about adoption of this bylaw, and I think your question is valid, but maybe a separate motion to ask for a report back on this, or might be more appropriate.
Mr. Garber.
There's some engagement happening at the table, but I could start by saying we have a number of initiatives moving forward related to engagement, including engagement with Indigenous serving organizations, as well as a pending discussion on a reconciliation action plan with our principal First Nation as a significant participant. Council has been very clear. We had engagement in the development of the overall policy, and we engage on a regular basis with organizations that have an interest, which go across the community. Specifically with respect to Comox First Nation, we have regularized, scheduled meetings under the either statutory meetings or project-based meetings. We anticipate that as Comox First Nation reforms will to continue to have monthly or bi-monthly meetings where we have a set agenda to talk about items that are coming forward. We've done that on the strategic cultural plan. We did that with various other initiatives, and we respond to the direction from Comox First Nation, which has evolved over the last 2 years. we have strong connections both at a political and staff level to make sure that we, when and where can meet to discuss specific items. And am confident that we can address this, but should council wish to give us direction to request regularized meetings with Comox First Nation to, put a point to our practice. We're completely open to that. Just would note that the ability to have meetings is entirely dependent on the capacity and availability and prioritization of those items by Comox First Nation. So would take direction from council in this regard. It's identified as an important component in our strategic plan, as well as council speaks to it very frequently in participating at our various tables.
And Ms. O'Connell, you had some to add as
Well,
well?
more, because I am still also the corporate officer and Councillor Frisch did rise on a point of order. If you'd like, and anything to do with the letter that was received, if questions arise regarding, that would provide clarification to allow council to form a decision when the vote is called, that would be in order. Anything, something that would be out of order would be to transition to a different topic that would then be looking at providing direction on that separate topic. So just a bit of clarification as to what the kind of the line is between the two. And then just to speak to what Mr. Garbutt was saying, we have the engagement strategy that is ongoing right now. And one of the significant benefits that came out of the last referral that council made to send the bylaw as well as the policy and the strategy to the 3 Indigenous serving organizations and to KFN was the significant feedback from Unbroken Chain and specifically Patty, who's here today. And really it was eye-opening in the sense that there wasn't previously a recognition that going to an umbrella organization was insufficient. With the feedback we received specifically from the most recent engagement, we made fundamental and significant changes in the process of our engagement strategy, where we held separate and culturally appropriate workshops with Indigenous serving organizations to specifically look at how we can improve engagement, recognizing the unique experiences and histories of Indigenous individuals within the city of Courtenay. So we're looking forward to that report coming out early in the new year from Spur Communications. The other components in regard to KFN, KFN is a government, so government to government is quite different. And you might recall that we did have at the same time as the engagement strategy, the same agenda, we also had the report regarding the beginning of the reconciliation framework work that outlined why government engagement is separate from general engagement and requires a unique and distinct process that really needs to move at the pace of trust. So we don't lead, we listen, and we go from there. So that process is what we are looking forward to and anticipating initiating in the near future.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, just as a follow-up on that, and thanks for the clarification on the point of order as well. Yeah, government, receiving a letter from our partner who's a government, I think is key to this discussion. I just will say that I'm happy to move a motion as per the city manager around some direction to staff around setting up meetings, but I'll cede the floor to others and I do have other questions. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for that. And Councillor Moore.
Great, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, when I read the letter, I think maybe because the timeline had, came in, this response came in a little bit later. There were some things I think that in the letter that we did address in the discussions that we've had over the last while, particularly around the guiding document that addresses some of the concerns. I guess my question is, there were a couple other things in here that I thought were really great suggestions. I'm wondering if the question to staff is, with the reconciliation framework and action plan, is there potential for perhaps using the points made in this letter as a starting point in that process? Or, I mean, I think it's just, it has highlighted some things that I think are probably really relevant to that framework. And I'm just wondering if it's possible to maybe address some of these more larger systemic kind of issues through that process.
And Mr. Carpenter
Yeah,
has a comment.
thank you through the mayor to Councillor Moore, and the responsibility for that project lies with my office. And we're gonna work, Ms. O'Connell and I are gonna be working on that. The aspects highlighted by Comox First Nation in their response are exactly the items that happen in a reconciliation action plan. They represent extremely common components, but as Ms. O'Connell had talked about, it's a process between and with to understand what that means. So I have spoken to the Intergovernmental Relations Director at KFN, and the purpose, and I can't speak on behalf, my questions regarding the input is to identify key components that are important for the nation as a elected government to engage together. And those are activities that we undertake. This bylaw itself, some of the references inside there are both general and specific, and they will definitely be the items that we would work together with the government to ensure that we have kind of a robust and deep and meaningful approach. And I wouldn't suggest that we don't now either, because we were highlighted by Comox First Nation as being leaders when the official community plan was developed, and we've been identified in the province as leaders in the work that we're doing in this as well. So I really appreciate the timing and the input that we need to listen to about our relationship going forward. I really honor that, and it's the type of thing and activities which will prepare ourselves as we move forward together, because there's big changes ahead potentially for the nation as well. The relationship we have on the Couscous project, the relationship we have in the identification and support for the Guardians program, the work and engagement we have around shared services for the current reserves. These are areas of cooperation, engagement, and relations that will undoubtedly grow. I would say regardless of the future, whether it's a treaty future or a non-treaty future, and I'm really excited about exploring that opportunity with Comox First Nation when they're ready.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. And Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. First of all, I think it's really important that we pass the bylaw tonight. I think that there's significant risk if we delay this further, both in terms of the message it sends to our staff, but also the fact that we delay providing the framework that our staff needs to do the important work out there in the community. And I believe there's also a risk that the bylaw may fail if we don't move it forward. But I think that we have a very significant input from Comox First Nation. It's very similar to the issues that were raised by the Indigenous serving organizations that we discussed at the last council meeting. And it was my intent to, thinking that the letter was actually on the agenda tonight, to propose that we receive it and refer it to staff for inclusion in the development of the future reconciliation action framework. And that's a motion that I'd be prepared to move subsequent to this one. I think it provides us with a way of acknowledging the receipt of the letter and incorporating it into the work that will be taking place further on. There may be other aspects of the letter that people want to bring forward as subsequent motions that affirm our approach to bylaw enforcement in relation to the Indigenous community in the Comox Nation. I would suggest that that's material for a subsequent meeting that would give us further time to digest and think about those possibilities. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hillian and Councillor I was gonna go to Councillor McCollum. Yeah, sorry.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, sorry, I turned my mic on and off. I think that's what mixed up the order. Yeah, just to start with my thoughts on where we're at with this process. I am in agreement with Councillor Hillian that it is important that we pass the bylaw tonight. We began this process some time ago, and it's been well recognized that we're not legally compliant right now, and we've put in a lot of work, and this point that we're at tonight is not an end point, but simply one more step in the process of how we're going to move forward. And you know, taking a step to extend our consultation process was super important. We just heard from staff on that there was some very important learning for our organization in doing that. And I'm happy to hear that that's going to inform how we do our implementation and our engagement going forward on this. So hearing that, I feel more comfortable in that, you know, things are imperfect. It's balancing a lot of conflicting points of view and priorities. And sometimes that is what balancing public interest is when we have these points of tension. So I think we're well set up to look at that as we move through it. And so I am in support of passing the bylaw tonight. Sorry, I'm just flipping back to this letter. I did have a question. There is number 5 bullet in the letter from KFN outlines how they would like the consultative process around the implementation to occur, and that they would like further community consultation in a year from now, which I think we're in doing this, we're set up to proceed with that in a more formal way. But there's another piece where they would like clear formal and informal restorative justice processes. And just thinking about our policy around the bylaw, to me, I guess I was having a hard time imagining exactly where this would fit in, as it's kind of, we do the punitive piece as a very last resort in our policy to begin with. And I'm wondering, in hearing that highlighted, if staff had any thoughts on how we could do that, or if maybe that is partially in our policy and maybe not in the bylaw. I'm just would like to hear staff's thoughts on that particular piece.
Thank you very much for the question, Councillor. Restorative justice is explicitly referenced within the bylaw compliance policy as one of the potential options for achieving bylaw compliance. At the same time, in regard to the application of restorative justice, that's more to do when you can't reach a compliance period or you're in a place of conflict. In regard to the way that my officers respond or interact with the unhoused community or vulnerable populations, it's not from a place of enforcement, it's a place from seeking compliance. So we don't issue tickets. You know, any type of conflict that we do have really comes from violent actions towards my staff. And we've spoken a bit about our use of trespass orders or temporary trespass orders when that occurs. But essentially, the restorative justice may be a potential option, but one piece that's already entrenched, or actions that are already entrenched within the strategy for bylaw compliance, which outlines 3 years worth of specific objectives and the items that we believe will allow us to reach those objectives. We have 2 different pillars that have action items around this that will are likely to result in that dialogue, that community feedback, as well as the reporting back. So just as a recap, in the strategic plan for bylaw compliance, one of our pillars is collaboration and partnership, and the objective there
is around so the action, sorry, is enhancing relationships with key contributors, including outreach support services, health services, and the RCMP by participating in roundtables and identifying communication channels to facilitate collaboration. One of the other pillars is trauma and culture informed practice. And one of the action items under that objective includes collaborating with internal and external agencies to create approaches to responding to bylaw matters related to the unhoused to ensure enforcement activities do not lead to re-traumatization. So with the delay of the adoption of the bylaw, unfortunately, some of the work that was identified within the 3-year plan, because as you recall, the policy was adopted and the strategy, but the bylaw was not at the same time. So we're a bit out of step at this point. That said, we've already been implementing the policy full steam, creating various relationships, attending training, entrenching really important principles and values within council approved policy work. And the strategy itself acknowledges a significant amount of learning that needs to take place, but also we are going to be absolutely reliant on collaboration and partnership in order to inform the next couple of year steps that are in the strategic plan, which include looking at amending all of our processes to ensure, or reviewing all of our processes to ensure that they are reflective of a trauma-informed practice. So there's actions that are already identified that would facilitate a lot of the feedback. And it's now quite a long ago, but you may recall that one of the commitments that was made when the bylaw first came forward was after the first year of implementation, coming back with feedback on that bylaw that would be coming out of these different tables and input groups.
Thanks so much for that. And back to Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. That answered a lot of my questions. I think it's really important for us to, because it's been so long, to remind our partners that we have in fact been thinking about some of the issues that in this case KFN has brought forward. And just to highlight and appreciate that this referral and the response to the referral obviously took time, and there's obviously some legal language here. So I just want to acknowledge that and the appreciation that that must have taken a prioritization exercise over at KFN. But number 2, 3, and 4, I did also want to just highlight that those are topics that we have spent significant time debating and hearing from staff, including responses from staff in previous staff reports. And so I did want to just speak to and bring those comments in as well, that we have spent time talking about the word offensive, trauma-informed practice, and the role of the city manager as it relates to inclement weather and disabilities. And with that, I'm happy to say that I'm confident in the responses we've received from staff and in this last response around the 1-year review, and looking forward to talking about that a year from today, hopefully. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Jolicoeur. And again, thanks for everybody for a great discussion. We've taken a very cautious approach, I believe, and happy to call a question now. All those in favor? Motion carries. All right, yes, Councillor Hillian.
I'm wondering if you would entertain a subsequent motion regarding receipt of the letter as referenced earlier.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I move that council receive the November 8th letter from Comox First Nation and refer the letter to staff for inclusion in the development of the future reconciliation action framework. And I can provide that wording to staff.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments on that? Councillor?
Yeah, thanks. I just want to clarify for staff that that's enough direction, particularly around the comment in the letter around a request for regular meetings between council, recognizing the timing that KFN has with their election coming up, but or do we need a separate motion to initiate that work?
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur. We don't need a separate motion. We have that request in already. I just, as I'd said previously, we can make a request and we will respond if that's accepted. One would presume if it's been highlighted, then perhaps the regularly scheduling of those meetings will be adjusted from it's been the practice in the last year or so. So it's we will definitely ask, and we will definitely respond based on whatever is indicated by the First Nation. I would say more recently, the request has been issue specific as opposed to generally, which was the approach in the last few years. And I understand it's evolving on a case by case basis. So council will be very much aware of what is planned. So I don't think we need specific direction in that regard, as it's our current practice.
All right, thanks for that. So we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor? And motion carries. Getting the council reports, Councillor Cole-Hamilton, Councillor Frisch, Councillor Hillian.
Mayor, I'll spare the details, but I just want to acknowledge that Councillor Morin and I had the privilege of attending the community safety and well-being conference in Victoria. And there was a lot of valuable learning that came out of that. And I would intend to present that information to my council colleagues at a future meeting. Thanks.
Thanks so much. And Councillor Jolicoeur, Councillor McCollum.
For once, I'm not going to pass. It's actually, I would have given the update at the end of the last meeting. It was running long. I recently attended a regional meeting. The mayor also joined on committee or the Vancouver Island Committee for Solid Waste and the Circular Economy. And it includes basically Vancouver Island and Sunshine Coast Waste Services. And it's an annual meeting where staff and elected representatives come together and discuss collective challenges around regulating and addressing solid waste and recycling services. So just wanted to let council know that there will be some advocacy points coming out of that and likely some potential ABICC resolutions that will, I'm not sure if we'll do it at the larger board or at individual councils, but stay tuned on that.
And thanks so much. And I believe Councillor McCollum, you're vice chair of that group as well. So thank you so much for your work on that. And Councillor Morin.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll just say a couple things. It just reminded me to mention that Councillor McCollum was I don't know, not elected, but appointed to the Municipal Finance Authority, which is awesome. She does great work on that. That was through the Comox Valley Regional District Board. I'll just do a short update. Several of us were at the social planning meeting earlier this month, and it was the meeting where the annual meeting where the Bunny Shannon Award is given out. And for those who don't know, Bunny Shannon passed away a few years ago now, and not too long ago, but a couple of years, I think now. And she was very active in the social justice work and community service, and was involved in many different social initiatives throughout the community, and the social planning committee came up with this idea to do an annual award to somebody who exemplifies the qualities of Bunny Shannon. And this year, April Lewis was the recipient. I was really excited to see that. I worked with April many years ago, and she's on Hornby Island and has done a lot of work with the Transition Society and community health, has championed gender equity, women's issues, community schools, restorative justice, many things. And I just wanted to make mention of April. Even though she's on Hornby, she's contributed to the larger Comox Valley with her work and contributions. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Morin. And I had a few things. Just want to acknowledge also that Councillor Cole-Hamilton was re-elected chair of the regional district. So congratulations there. Yesterday, I did attend a BC Hydro emergency planning workshop. And obviously, given the weather that we have right now, very important to see that they have their stuff well planned out. I also attended a conversation circle at the library a couple weeks ago now, about a week and a half ago. I also tried to attend last week as we're going through the Parks and Open Spaces bylaw, just to be there to answer any questions. Unfortunately, last week they were oversubscribed, so there was a sign on the door that they were full. And unfortunately, this Friday and the following Friday, I won't be able to attend. So if there, I know other councillors have expressed interest. So if you want to, there may be some interest there. So just be prepared around Parks and Open Spaces. Also attended the telethon that raised $115,000 for the Child Development Center. So again, just incredibly inspired by our community. Attended the Diwali Celebration of Light as well. And again, a great event. Can I remember? Oh, yeah, Remembrance Day. I'm trying to read my own chicken scratches, but yes, again, it was great to see all the people out for Remembrance Day this year. And then finally, just an acknowledgement to the council members that represented the city at the trivia night for the Cumberland Forest Society. Again, a great community event. And with that, we'll recess back into in camera.